Όταν γυρίζετε το 47 έχετε γράψει ότι ξαναβρίσκετε γνωστές εικόνες της Ελλάδας, αλλά και μια Ελλάδα τελείως διαφορετική. Έχετε μεγαλώσει στο μεταξύ κι εσείς, άρα βλέπετε διαφορετικά τα πράγματα. Ποιες ήταν οι πιο σημαντικές εικόνες που μπορείτε να θυμηθείτε σήμερα από την Ελλάδα? Τι ήταν αυτά που περισσότερο σας σημάδεψαν και σας έκαναν να ασχοληθείτε και με την Ελλάδα περισσότερο?
Well, it wasn't only 47. In 1949, I went over for a year as a teacher under the Fulbright program, and that's when I really consolidated my image of Greece. But in 47, when I went back, there was all the evidence still in northern Greece of what had happened during the Katochi and all of that. It was still alive and very disturbing for me because, of course, I felt to some degree that I was a Greek, having grown up there partly, and I felt that this was something that I had missed. And it upset me, and it also upset me to learn from my childhood friends what they'd been through, the starvation, the difficult days, how they somehow survived by borrowing, by doing what they could. Terrible stories of that kind, which I then wrote about. One of my first novel has that section in it. That was 47, but 49, I actually lived the end of the Civil War. It happened in the fall of that year. And I was teaching students at the American Farm School, some of whom had been captured by the Andartes, who came in and took all of the senior class and a couple of the junior class and took them off to the mountains. And they all came back, except one. Yeah. They all managed over the next 3 or 4 months somehow to escape and to come back.
Και λέτε ότι είναι και το τέλος της αθωότητας, γράφετε νομίζω ή στην Σπονδή.
Ναι, that's true. You've got the double image there. But, and the loss of innocence is both a loss of innocence about the political side, about war and what war does, but it was also sexual partly, because that was the story of growing up, falling in love, and the consequences of that, which are sometimes wonderful, sometimes a little more complicated, as you know.
Yes.
Τότε μάθατε για το Χορτιάτι ή ό,τι συνέβη στο Χορτιάτι το μάθατε αργότερα? Γιατί έχετε γράψει ένα πολύ ωραίο μυθιστόρημα σε σχέση με τη σφαγή στο Χορτιάτι από τους Γερμανούς λίγο πριν εγκαταλείψουν τη χώρα. Ναι.
That was in 49. When I went back in 49, I learned about it very clearly because it was still there, destroyed. I saw the destruction not only of Khortyati, which was very direct and very close to where I grew up, but around the countryside. That was one thing she was doing, to inspect and see what the reconstruction was, whether it was really happening and how it was happening. And that was a devastating experience to see what had happened to so many villages in northern Greece. It wasn't only Khortyati, it was so many others.
Και πότε παίρνετε και την απόφαση πια να ασχοληθείτε με την Ελλάδα?
During the course of the summer after my sophomore year, I went back to Greece to do an inventory with Bruce Lansdale of what was at the American Farm School, and I got re-involved in that experience. And I also started writing, I don't know why, poetry. I think because Bruce Lansdale also was writing poetry. He was writing comic verse and I was writing romantic verse. And by the end of that summer, I decided I wanted to study English literature, which is the thing I enjoyed most. Προσπάθησα να το γνωρίσω. It was very difficult. I wrote a whole section. This was in the end of my first year. I heard at the end of that, this was in probably June of that year, that Seferis was either in London or coming to London. Actually, I think he was actually coming to London as a diplomat. So I wrote him a letter and I said, I'm a young American who is writing a dissertation on your poetry and I have a number of questions that I'd like to ask, blah, 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 blah. And I never got an answer. So I wrote a second one, never got an answer. And finally, a year later, after I'd finished the whole section on Seferis and on Cavafy and was about to submit the dissertation, I heard that he was coming to London as ambassador. So I finally wrote him another letter and said, look, I've been a year now, a year and a half, been writing on your poetry. And he said, come for tea. Everybody wants to invite you for tea in England. thank God, you know. And boy, he had a tea. Let me tell you, it even was better than Mrs. Trapanis' tea, because he was a diplomat and he had what he wanted. And I went and had this, which I've described in great detail, my interview with him about his poetry, which he was very reluctant to talk about, but we talked about as much as we could. I learned as much as I could, and we gradually became friends, because I saw him later, and every summer that I went to Greece, I would look him up and we'd go have a fish dinner, and finally we used to go swimming together. He almost drowned one time that we went swimming, but I won't tell you all these anecdotes.
Το έχετε πει αυτό.
That one I said, yes.
Το έχετε πει σε μια ομιλία στο Μουσείο Μπενάκη για το Σεφέρι που παραλίγο να πνιγεί, αλλά μπορείτε να μας το πείτε.
We went out to, oh God, what was the beach now? You see, even my memory at 85. Bravo, Skinia. And it was my first swim, so I went whoo, as I always did when I got there, and direct running into the sea and swimming out until I was exhausted. And when I got out and put my head up, back there, they were saying, Ella, Ella, come in. Oh, Yorgos, pniete. So I rushed back, and indeed, he'd fallen into a laco of some kind, and he, like me, had problems with his legs. He couldn't get up, and he drank a lot of water, and he nearly drowned. Anyway, we got him out on the shore. I don't know how. I think my wife and myself and Maros Seferis somehow all dragged him out and laid him out on the beach. And she said, "Ίσως πρέπει να το αναδοποιήσουμε." And I said, δεν πιστεύω να υπάρχει ανάγκη να το κάνουμε αυτό, επειδή το νερό, νομίζω, αν δεν έχει μπει στα πνεύματα, δεν υπάρχει πρόβλημα. Και ανοίγει τα μάτια του Σεφέρης και τι πνεύματα, πνεύμονες, και λένε πως είσαι μεταφραστής μου. And I said, εντάξει, το σώσαμε, δεν υπάρχει πρόβλημα. Τι ωραίο πράγμα που ήταν. Θυμάμαι στο πανεπιστήμιο έγραψε το όνομα George Seferis won the Nobel Prize. Και πέρασε ένας καθηγητής πιο μεγάλος και λέει, ποιος είναι αυτός? Το λέω, μπα, ποιος είναι? Ο μέγας ποιητής της Ελλάδος, ο Γιώργος Σεφέρης. Δεν ήξερα, δεν ήταν γνωστός τόσο. Εμένα μου είχαν πει, πότε θα αρχίσεις να ασχολείσαι με κάτι σοβαρό στην αμερικάνικη λογοτεχνία? Και εγώ λέω, είμαι σοβαρός και θα προχωρήσω με αυτό που κάνω. Και αυτό έκανα.